Dr. Zach Bush, what an absolute pleasure to have you here at the Be That Life podcast. And it was such an honor to share a stage with you as well at the Cayenne Wellness Festival. How was your experience there?
I was impressed. I mean, it's a fun thing to watch a country like the UAE starting to get interested in this topic of health and longevity. And it's interesting to see government starting to invest in this subject, which is a critical shift, I believe, in the marketplace. We've seen a lot of consumer demand globally around biohacking and some of these themes that have come into the longevity world. But what is happening globally right now is a fundamental collapse of human health and biology, and the chronic disease epidemic has put such a massive burden of not just disease but economic stress on countries worldwide. And the Middle East is certainly not spared that. And we see extremely high levels of infertility and chronic obesity and metabolic situations within the Arab countries as well. And so it's appropriate and exciting, I think, in some ways, to see government starting to invest in that space and start to do that. So for a government-inspired and supported event, I think Cayenne was a bit of a class of its own in regards to the multi-stakeholders really being present there. And I'm curious to see if your Minister of Health comes to the next one, because your Minister of Tourism put on the event this time, and it was so successful. I think that the increasing demand and awareness of why is this topic important to the UAE, I could see some of the rest of the government really getting involved in the next couple of years. And my hope is that we will see a fundamental shift in healthcare policy around the world in these coming years due to this kind of cliff that we're hitting on human fertility, probably going to lead the charge on the crisis.
You know, the UAE over the last 5 years has really accelerated in the way that they look at longevity and health, aside from being it a massive shift in our global awareness. I'm just really glad being raised in the UAE that I'm seeing that trend really becoming something super important here, because as you understand, Middle Eastern culture have a completely different way on how they view health, take care of health, and also how they view longevity. Before we dive deep into topics that I'm very passionate about, the gut microbiome, soil degradation, and so on, I really, really want to get to know the man behind the mission. Because we all have a story, and I think at the end of the day, our mission and who we are is the driving force of why we do what we do. So please take me back to, what was your childhood like?
I had a really blessed childhood in that I was raised in low-income housing, government housing in Boulder, Colorado, among the Hmong people that had been displaced from Cambodia, and other parts of South Asia. And the Hmong people have one of the more beautiful indigenous practices of, I would say, both their fashion and their farming really define the beauty of the culture. And so they have such a deep understanding and appreciation of the connection to their food. And so we had this community garden out back of the government housing system, and the community garden was these little 10 by 10 plots that each individual could sign up to have. And so I remember going out as a child, walking across this little plank, across this drainage ditch to get over to the gardens, and I would be going to look for my mom, and all of these Hmong women would be squatting in the middle of each little garden plot in these, ground length gowns that were embroidered in these incredible colors. And so they looked like flowers in my child, image. When I think back to those first little memories of my life, like black gowns with all this embroidery, crouching in the middle of these green gardens that were just so abundant. And they would sit there and crouch there, and with a stick that was long enough to hit all of the perimeter without moving, they were the insecticide and pesticide, and they were herbicide, they weeded, and they just were kind of, without even thinking about it, they were creating these abundant gardens around them. And from that, my mother really got passionate about gardening, and I grew up eating from gardens most of my life, which was really a blessed way to enjoy life. And so I think in some ways we see it around the world as the more wealth that we are engaged with, the more divorced from nature we get. And in so many ways, the greatest wealth is this remaining connection, albeit maybe just a thread now on the globe of this connection to earth and gardening and food systems and all of that. And so we've got an opportunity to kind of revalue humanity, I think, at this point. And are we going to value ourselves high enough that we will understand ourselves to be back as a part of nature, and in that maybe save ourselves from this chronic disease crisis that we're in.
And what got you into medicine?
That was a journey in the Philippines. I was going into engineering, planned to go into robotics or something like that. I was a mechanic growing up, very blue-collar kid, didn't like school much at all, and so spent most of my time growing up in my teen years in garages building race cars and four-wheel drive vehicles in the mountains of Colorado, and so very passionate about building, and so I thought engineering fit, and then took a year off before going to my engineering program, and ended up getting called a few minutes after to decide to take the year off by an aunt of mine who was working in the Philippines with a group of international midwives. And she asked what I was up to. I said, I'm taking a year off. And she's like, what do you want to do? I said, I think I'll travel and explore the world a bit. She said, well, why don't you come to the Philippines and birth babies? I was like, that sounds extreme. So I worked for 6 months in a discount tire company, busting tires to make enough money to get over to the Philippines, and spent 6 months living there and working with this international group of midwives. And really within the first couple of births, I was like, okay, I'm going this direction. This is way cooler than building machines. Like, these little machines coming out of these women are unbelievable.
Yeah.
And watching women in abject poverty birthing miracles was a really cool story of how biology works. And biology is ignoring our economics. Biology is ignoring our social position, and biology is honoring a woman's body to be able to do what it does. And that we choose to make headlines about a man named Elon Musk that fills a steel tube with rocket fuel and lights it on fire, and it shoots up in the air and it falls back down, and we're sitting there in amazement, versus a woman living in abject poverty who managed to create a safe space in her body that a single cell will turn into a 70 trillion celled organism that's now in concert with a massive soil system that will support it into life, and then give birth to that thing to go on this journey of maturation and spiritual exploration and creativity. It's just dumbfounding that we are not paying attention to the miracle of life in a different way on this planet. And for that, we're losing life very quickly, because we just simply have looked away from its miracle for a long time, and we've come to value the built systems, the engineering and physics of the world, rather than the life force within the planet and one another. And it's hopefully a trend back towards that valuation of life that we see in your work and your products and everything else. Like, there's more and more people now wondering if we've got to start to value life differently and support it differently, and with a higher sense of investment in life rather than just built systems.
When did we start losing touch?
Long time ago.
How long ago?
That's an ancient story of humans right there. I think we've gone through probably different levels of the injury. The wound of abandonment is basically our shared wound that we carry as humans. We believe that we were abandoned by nature. All of our religious stories and mythology in general all speaks to these sudden rejections from the garden. We're kicked out of nature, and we do it all the way into our English language today. If you look up the Oxford English Dictionary definition of nature, it's everything in the earth. It's minerals, plants, animals, as opposed to humans or anything humans have made. And so not only did we write ourselves out of nature, we put ourselves in opposition to nature in the definition of it. And I believe that plays through. We see the built world around us playing that out to an extreme measure. As we air condition our spaces, we build ourselves as far away from Earth as possible. We create food systems that are entirely processed and have not a single element of nature left in it by the time it gets there, kind of thing. So we're isolating ourselves further and further, I believe, due to this original wound of abandonment. And in that rejection, we developed this egoic mind of like, well, if you won't have us, we'll beat you, And so we're in this warlike mentality, this kind of egoic, masculine wound kind of mentality against nature. And for that, we are undermining our capacity to be alive. Biology is inherently an interdependent and interconnected system of species diversity. Without diversity, you do not get life. And the last 20, 30 years of genetic sequencing of human bodies, we've really learned this in spades. There's not a single organ in your body that is not nursemated to its health by a complex ecosystem of bacteria and fungi, yeast, protozoa, and the rest. And so we have complex soil systems within a human body. And we used to think it was just gut health and the bacteria there, but we now know that there's important critical microbes within breast tissue, within the prostate, within the brain itself. And so every single organ is teeming with life outside of what we call human cells to support that. And then that life is dwarfed by the amount of non-human life inside human cells. And those bacteria are called mitochondria. And we now are starting to come to terms with the fact that human health doesn't happen at all if you don't have a rich microbiome that's feeding the mitochondria. It's the relationship between the microecosystem outside your cells and the microsystem inside your cells that creates the potential for life and ultimately health.
You changed direction. You had a switch in terms of what you are really passionate about and focused on. And you initially started off as a hospital, working as a doctor, and especially also in hospice care. You have definitely seen and treated and worked with a lot of cancer patients. You spoke a lot about chemotherapy. You did talk about how chemotherapy either helped or didn't help so much. And also your transition from working in that space to doing something completely different now. Can you go back to telling me why that shift happened and where you are today?
Yeah, it was a winding road through that process. So my first subspecialty in medicine was internal medicine, which is basically hospital-based care. So it's the foundation of all of the subspecialties: cardiology, pulmonology, renal. All these subspecialties are coming out of internal medicine foundation. And so you're basically living and breathing hospital care and a lot of end-stage disease management. And so these are patients that have already had their heart attack or had their cancer or whatever. Now you're trying to, piece them back together through a pharmaceutical model. And in that journey, I managed to get another subspecialty, which was really inspired out of my frustration with this kind of churning disease management model that I was experiencing in the ICUs. I'd patch up a patient, 4 or 5 days of intense care, millions of dollars of technology pumped into these people, and then you send them back home, and 3 months later they're back with the same disease but worse, and it takes you now 3 weeks to get them out of and then 3 months later they're back in and they die in the ICU. And so that end of life care that is what is hospital-based medicine now is not fixing anything, and so much suffering was happening.
So what are they actually doing if not fixing? Isn't that the point? That's why we go to a doctor, and that's what society has programmed us to thinking the doctor is the cure for all disease. Why isn't being cured?
Basically, it's the wrong toolbox. And so historically, if you went to a healer, they would start rebuilding your foundation of health. And so if you went to an herbalist 1,000 years ago, they would be carrying tens of thousands of years of oral tradition and knowledge that had been consolidated through multi-generational practice. And so an herbalist or a healer at the time would bring a deep understanding of the relationship between the human body and its nature around it, and how nature was going to serve that body back to its health. And so it was all about regrounding the body in the abundance of nature. And this really persisted all the way up until about 1910. And so 100 years ago, there was a sudden shift that happened, and it happened in the United States as the oil tycoons, Rockefellers and others, got behind a project that would be called ultimately the Flexner report. They hired a doctor named Dr. Flexner, and this report went into basically an effort to damn or demonize all previous medical management of disease. And so herbalism, acupuncture, anything you can think of dating back 4,000, 9,000 years of practice was all copped as, witchcraft and dangerous. And so there's a huge campaign around it's only modern medicine that's going to work to heal you. And what the Flexner report defined as modern medicine was small molecule synthetics. And so molecules that were being derived from nature and patented as new drugs. And at the time, the big mega drug was aspirin. And so salicylic acid is a naturally occurring compound, and Bayer Pharmaceuticals was able to patent that as a synthetic, ultimately, or a processed substrate of salicylic acid.
Can you just explain that to our listeners, what that means?
Basically, you're taking a piece of nature and you're manipulating it so that it's slightly different than nature intended, and then you can patent it. And so by purifying and then manipulating molecules, we can create a non-natural compound. And if it's non-natural compound, then you can patent it and you can protect that IP. So aspirin became a bonkers successful drug, largely because we weren't monitoring the complications. And even in my own training in the 1990s, it was widely understood that if aspirin had tried to come to market today, it never would have made it to market because it's too dangerous. It causes too many GI bleeds. It causes, horrible, descaling rashes in children. Like the mortality from aspirin is high enough that it probably wouldn't have passed any regulatory, but we didn't have regulatory. So aspirin goes bonkers. It's the new mega drug and, good for everything. And so Bayer Pharmaceuticals, fast forward 100 years, is still one of the biggest, players in the whole market. And they've done that by continuing, like all pharmaceutical companies, to manipulate nature to be able to own it. And Bayer is now the largest owner of our food system globally. They purchased Monsanto and many other companies, and they have their own GMO called Liberty Link. And so between Roundup Ready seeds and Liberty Link, they own the largest seed company in the world. And so they're owning, by manipulating nature, they're owning patents on the production of food globally.
So this is the herbicides and pesticides and...
These are genetically modified crops that allow those herbicides and pesticides to be sprayed without killing the plant. So before 1996, if you sprayed any of our crops, they would die. Genetically modify them with an enzyme that can break down those herbicides in some parts of the plant, then they can survive high chemical residues of these things. And so unfortunately, those chemical residues stay in the plant. And while the plant can survive that, the animals that are consuming that, including the humans, are not genetically modified to handle it. And so we're getting that downstream consequence of the chemicals, even though the plant survives. Instead of the plant being the thing that dies, it's the consumer that accelerates its death by consuming these chemicals. So the genetic modification allowed for plants to be a carrier of poisons, and that was probably not a great idea for human history.
So the conversation has really been a lot focused in terms of the microbiome on gut health, but it's very little focus and just very little discussed on just microbiome degradation, soil, how that impacts climate, how that impacts carbon footprint, carbon levels. From your insights, what can we do to replace and reverse these systems in terms of really focusing on the microbiome health of soil?
Yeah, so maybe one way to look at this is a simple definition of life. Life is basically a concentration of light energy. The amount of light produced in physics has been maximized through nuclear fission and fusion, so we call that a star or a sun. The sun is producing all of that light and thermal energy through the breaking of and the kind of breakdown of large radioactive isotopes on the periodic chart. The sun is then collected on this planet by green things. And so it started with probably slime molds and then eventually got to bacteria and fungi, and then it got to plants. And so there was a slow adaptation of more and more complex plant life that was consolidating more and more light energy per cubic centimeter. To get a single bacteria to occur, you have to collect about 1,000 times more energy per cubic centimeter than the sun can produce. And so if you go to the surface of the sun, cubic centimeter, extraordinary amount of energy coming out of that cubic centimeter, but it's not enough to make life. You're still 1,000-fold short. And so you got to concentrate 1,000 centimeters of that surface area to get enough light for just bacteria, single-celled organisms, to be able to organize life. The reason why bacteria don't blind you is because they're using that energy for work instead of emitting it as light energy. And so light turns to particle turns to matter then goes to work in what we call life. And so the difference between a mineral, which has got a lot more energy than the sun in the sense of the amount of light energy that's now in particle state, is so intense in something like a diamond. And so whether it's gold or diamond or any other mineral that you can think of or gem, those are concentrations of light energy and still don't make life. Not enough light there. You keep concentrating light, and then you can suddenly make this paradigm shift where there's enough intelligence and information available through the energy to actually coordinate life. The innovation that came along to make humans possible, or any animal, was mitochondria. And so the process of consolidating light energy to the fold of bacteria, 1,000-fold, was fermentation. Fermentation breaks down carbon to release sunlight again. You'll remember that the green things take CO2 out of the atmosphere and store sunlight between two carbons in a carbon bond. And that carbon bond is then broken apart by mitochondria, or if in a log. Like a log is just a big pile of carbon that's been self-organized into a living system. The tree falls down, you cut it up, you go and light that, and what's happening when you burn a log is it's releasing all of the solar energy that was stored in there. And so you're just releasing sunlight back out in the form of fire. So that fire is just nuclear energy that had come in from solar light and then transferred into the plant, consolidated, and now the log is burning. And so carbon, when it breaks apart, is going to release energy in the form of heat, light, any sort or electromagnetic field. And so the mitochondria inside your cells are basically doing that to the glucose and fatty acids that comes in from our food. So carbohydrates or fats, the calories in our food, are long carbon chains, and the mitochondria are breaking those apart and releasing all that solar energy. The mitochondria do that through a respiratory cycle that's 10 times more efficient than fermentation. So the mitochondria was this massive innovation of consolidation of light energy on the planet. And so with that innovation, we suddenly got nematodes and earthworms and reptiles and eventually mammals. And that whole consolidation and iteration on life is more and more light per cubic centimeter. And so with that understanding, you can now kind of reverse engineer your understanding of what we need to do for food systems and soil systems, as you asked. As we have depleted the microbiome in soil systems, we have decreased the amount of light energy available to the plants that grow in that soil. And for that, they become weaker. And so their immune systems are weak. The amount of carbohydrate they produce or nutrient density decreases. The amount of complexity of the medicine within the food decreases. The tomatoes today, estimates are somewhere between takes 20 to 45 tomatoes to make the same nutrients as one tomato today.
Let's take a short pause and reflect on what's truly impacting your health. You can eat clean, meditate, take your supplements, but if your space is toxic, your body stays in survival mode. At AWA, they design homes that do the actual opposite of that. They amplify your energy. Crystal charged, light balanced, air purified, and aligned with the rhythms of nature. Because true wellness doesn't stop in your skin. It surrounds you. AWA, homes that heal, homes that know you. Now back to the conversation, because the future of wellness starts at home.
And so, or one tomato from 50 years ago. And so we just have this fraction of nutrient density due to this lack of light or life force within the soil system. So as we started to go to these mega industries of chemical farming, we depleted the whole global soil system and water system of the life force by killing the bacteria and fungi and ultimately the mitochondria inside any living being through these chemicals that are all functioning as antibiotics. And so the glyphosate being the most ubiquitous chemical on Earth right now, we pour 4 billion pounds of this chemical into our soils every year.
That's mad.
It is a madness. 4 billion pounds of anything is probably a bad idea, but 4 billion pounds of an antibiotic into your soil system to decrease the metabolic function of your planet, in hindsight, really bad idea. And so what's come out of that is the collapse of human biology. In the 1980s, collapse of metabolism began with obesity. Obesity and visceral fat gain in your liver and abdominal cavity occurs when you can no longer burn the calories that you're consuming. And that's because the chemicals are starting to kill the mitochondria inside the cells. And so you're eating plenty of calories, but you can't burn it back into sunlight, so you just store the calories. And so obesity is not a process of eating too much food. It's a process of not being able to process that food into light. The people that eat the most calories on the planet are athletes. Michael Phelps eating 4,500 to 5,000 calories a day when he's in active competition might be 6,000 calories a day. No obesity. We have this belief of it must be the intake that's doing, but it's not the intake, it's the output that's failing. You're failing to output the energy of the food, and therefore you're becoming obese. So that starts in the 1980s. By the late 80s, we have enough fat consolidation in the human population in the liver that we're developing the diabetes epidemic. By the early 90s, we start to see immune dysfunction because right inside of that gut lining is 80% of your immune function.
Right.
And so with the chronic inflammation and dysfunction of all that fat now being stored around your gut lining, you start to get immune dysfunction. So by the early 90s, we see huge dysfunction in allergies. And so we become allergic to the foods that we were consuming. Most classic was the allergy to wheat. And so this gluten sensitivity, then celiac disease that came along in the 1990s was on the tail end of us adding glyphosate to wheat. And so we started to poison the wheat to dry it quicker. And then that is now used globally in many different crops. Here in the Middle East, actually, it's your lentils that are your biggest problem. And so dal, which is my favorite food on the planet, I just came back from Mumbai. It's one of the best foods on the planet. Like, unbelievable protein source, unbelievable carbohydrate source, unbelievable fiber source. Like, it's like the go-to. And yet, if I eat dal in India, I get this reactive arthritis from the amount of inflammation that's being carried by the amount of toxin in those, because the level of herbicides are kind of off the charts in those lentils, because they're no longer being grown in India. They're being grown in Canada, where they have a short growing season. And so they use the glyphosate as a desiccant or a drying agent to shorten the harvest cycle so they can get that harvested before winter sets in. So Canada is producing a massive amount of lentils that are helping fuel the Indian food marketplace. And for that, the Indian fertility is going in the gutter. So we're dropping the vitality of peoples all over the world by the exportation of chemical-based food systems. And so my nutrition clinic was what really unburied all of this for me, because I was giving all my patients in 2010. I left the university to start a nutrition center to reverse chronic disease through food. And about a third of my patients were showing so much inflammation, and I was having them heavy on the cruciferous vegetables. So it was, broccoli, cauliflower, cruciferous vegetables like kale, and then like sweet potatoes and your root vegetables, beets, turnips, sweet potatoes. Turns out, what I didn't know at the time was those crops are all the ones that will consolidate glyphosate at the highest levels because of their metabolic relationship to the soil system. The reason they're so high in the medicinal features of food is because they're really good at extracting unique nutrients. And so when they're in that state of sequestration of great nutrients, they're pulling up a lot of chemicals. So your root vegetables and then your cruciferous vegetables, if grown conventionally right now, are harboring an enormous amount of these toxins. So we're basically in this slippery slope right now of really seeing the whole collapse of the metabolic system, allergy being the big piece there in the 1990s, turn into something more desperate, which is autoimmune disease. And the autoimmune disease transition that happened in the mid-1990s was where there's so much immune stimulation that your body starts to get confused about what's self. Everything just seems to be at war. You're now battling against every bite of food you eat. Every drink of water is insulting your immune system because you've lost the boundary between outside and inside. And that's largely because of the leaky gut phenomenon that happens from glyphosate. Glyphosate is the number one chemical in the world, and it drives this breakdown in the protein or structure of the Velcro between the gut lining. So as you break that Velcro apart, the tight junctions, you get leak of everything that's in the gut right into your immune system without filtration. And so it's that unfiltered insult to the immune system that then drives the allergy and then eventually the autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease is where your own tissue becomes seen as something foreign to your body, and your immune system starts to destroy it. Autoimmunity, thyroid is probably number one worldwide. In the United States, by the early 2000s, we had 1 in 4 girls by age 12 with thyroid antibodies. And so at that level of 25% of your human population destroying its own gland that produces the metabolic life force within the body, you can start to see this very vicious cycle of kill the soil metabolism, and the immediate consequence, within a decade, is you're going to start killing your own metabolism. And so it's this vicious cycle that nature has designed, these nice checks and balances that, hey, if you go and injure the ecosystem, there's going to be immediate and equal, ramifications for your own biology. And so ultimately, it's probably a design of nature to protect herself from something like a human that comes along and thinks it's separate from nature and going to destroy everything else for its own health. You can't do that. Nature doesn't let that happen. So the whole antibiotic era that we've been in, especially since the 1940s with the advent of penicillin, our doctors are giving us antibiotics. Our farmers are giving us antibiotics. Our chemical companies are owning both industries. And so you've got chemical companies that are, just in the U.S. market alone, around $7 trillion a year of products. And so this is bigger than any economy that's ever been made. The entire military in the United States is about $1 billion a year, or just short of $1 trillion a year, 800 billion. So you're shy of $1 trillion. Your pharmaceutical medical complex is around $5 trillion a year. And so you've got this massive, 5x of military spending on disease spending, and the profits are all coming through these small molecule antibiotics, primarily herbicides, pesticides, antibiotics, small molecule chemicals for drugs. You add to that the agriculture industry, it's another couple $1 trillion. So U.S. alone, $7 trillion, or 40% of our entire GDP is coming from these chemical, or fueling the pockets of these chemical industries. And so we love to demonize things like oil companies, but oil is a fraction of the damage on the surface compared to what we're doing with these chemicals that are antibiotic across soil systems, human systems, and the rest.
So as someone who is really radically trying to change the narrative and how we need to take care of our soil, what have you done so far to enhance the progress of the current depletion in our soil?
Fortunately, farmers all over the world are starting to get a hold of this reality. And what's driving that is this economic collapse of farming. And so globally, we see the highest suicide rates in farmers that have ever existed because they are losing the family farms. In the United States, we're losing about 6,000 farms a year. And those are family farms that are usually multi-generational, 3 to 5 generations in the family, and suddenly that kid is losing the farm. And the psychosocial pressure of losing your family farm after generations is pretty intense. And so we see that kind of social, familial weight and responsibility coupled with the economic stress, coupled with the isolation that's now happening in farming, where you don't even talk to your neighbors anymore. Farming used to be everybody's helping each other out, raise the barn, do whatever. That's not happening anymore. It's a cutthroat industry. Farmers are competing against each other for pennies on the dollar. It's just a ruthless pennies game.
Even in places like Bali, for example, because I go there often and I see a lot of them, still the way that they farm and the great produce there. It's the same over there?
Unfortunately, globally, we're seeing this trend towards chemical adoption in peasant farming. Right. Right now, most of the humans are still fed by a peasant farmer. 70% of the world's population, 8 billion people, 70%, or somewhere around 5 billion people are being fed by peasant farmers that are farming less than 2 acres, and they've been doing that for generations. So they know how to produce their rice or their 3 fruits or whatever they're doing, and so there's a familial history to this crop production, and they remember how to do this over the generations. Then the chemical companies come in and are now able to seed these technologies down at these tiny little farm levels. And so they're no longer just selling to 5,000 acre farms in the Midwest of the U.S. They're selling to small farmers in India, and throughout Africa and South Asia and the rest. And so these small farmers, just within 3 or 4 years of chemical farming, suddenly see their soil systems collapse. And suddenly they have failing crops. And so the agronomist who sold them the seed and the GMO and the chemicals in the first place comes back and is like, oh, it's because your soil's depleted. Here's your chemical input. And so here's a chemical fertilizer. And so now they're buying fertilizer and they put that in. Chemical fertilizers giving NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, but not the rest of the periodic chart. And so the plant grows quick and green, but it's lacking all of the medicine within its own root system and food system. And so it becomes prone to disease. And so now the farmer's got invasive weeds and it's got pests that are coming in the form of insect attack. So now the agronomist comes back and says, well, here's your chemical GMO seed and the chemical sprays, and here's your chemical inputs on the fertilizer, and here's the chemicals you're going to spray that moth with, or that fungus that's now your problem. And so there's just this economic drive that's enriching chemical companies and bankrupting family farms all over the world.
So it's the lack of knowledge of these farmers that these large companies are benefiting from?
Certainly a lack of knowledge, because not even doctors know any of this science. I wasn't taught a darn thing about glyphosate. It was never even mentioned to me in I was 17 years in academia, 3 subspecialties of medicine, top university in the world. Blah, blah, blah.
They don't talk about it.
Nothing covered. I didn't even know that mitochondria were anything more than just like a power plant. It was in my research in cancer where I started to realize these things are actually driving the entire function of life. They're the communication network, they're the nutrient delivery system, they're regulatory around cell cycle. These microbes inside our body are doing 90% of the work. The human cell does very, very little work because it's so simple. A human cell actually only has 20,000 genes. We inherit 20,000 genes from mom and dad. it's a very low number. A fruit fly has 13,000 genes and a flea has 30,000 genes. So you're somewhere between a fruit fly and a flea when it comes to your genetic complexity as a human, if you were human. But to be a human body is actually to be a complex ecosystem. And so what makes us intelligent, both at the biologic level of protein synthesis as well as the intelligence level of a neural system, for example, is the inputs from all of the non-human life forms. And so the ecosystem within the human happens to be the most complex ecosystem a body has ever been able to hold. And that includes the other mammals. And so a human colon holds more biodiversity per centimeter than the colon of a dolphin or a bat or a monkey or whatever it is. We are an incredibly diverse and incredibly, connected ecosystem when we are healthy. And as we start eating and consuming antibiotics, we're dumbing down that connected intelligence that makes us appear to be human intelligence. Human intelligence is ecosystems intelligence ultimately, and nature is speaking through us, and that's what makes us look intelligent. When we lose the biodiversity, we lose the information and we lose the ability to communicate that information across systems. 90% of the serotonin made in your body to fuel that communication is made in your gut lining. 50% is made of the dopamine made in your gut lining, another 40% made by your kidney tubules. And so this dopamine, serotonin, and being a couple of the neurotransmitters that get information transmitted across your neural system are heavily reliant on the microbiome fueling that production across these complex systems in the body. And so this is really our crisis, is we thought we were humans against nature, and now we find out we're only human because of nature within us. And this is the mentality switch that we're seeing exciting, is farmers are starting to get this. Farmers are starting to say, screw this, no more chemical inputs, no more inputs in general. Let me just see if I can go back to where my great-grandfather was farming, because they didn't need any chemicals and they fed the family for 40,000 years in this area. You go to the Amazon rainforest, you go to First Nations people in North America, 40,000-year food traditions that kept themselves fed and survived, massive climate crises and changes and wars and pestilence, and it was all resilient because it was an interconnected system.
Okay, 90% of the food currently and the produce is nutrient depleted due to modern farming. But then also there's this narrative that's going around is that everyone should be eating organic. But we also know that now organic food is also nutrient depleted based on over-farming. So what I would love to know is it possible for humans to truly heal though without radically changing agricultural practices?
No, there's no biohacking that can hack us out of this way. And we've only got one route out of our situation. That's to reintegrate into soil. Our food systems have to immediately become based on nutrient density and complexity within regenerative soil systems. Regenerative is different than what we would call organic. Organic is basically a list of things what not to do. And so don't spray this, don't spray that, don't spray this, don't spray that. Okay, you're organic. But nowhere in the definition of organic food or the certification of an organic crop does it mention soil nutrient density, water retention, mitochondrial density, carbohydrate density. None of it's mentioned. Nothing that's important to your health is actually mentioned in the organic certification in regards to really supporting life. It just says less toxin. So right now, the best we can do in food is less toxin. We eat organic. The movement of regenerative agriculture came along, seeing that there was a power. Regenerative agriculture came along to really supercharge the idea of the farmer to say, I can get rid of all the inputs and I can start doing these practices and I get more crop resilience, less water problems, I have drought tolerance, I have flood tolerance, I've got this resilient soil, and I'm making more economically because I'm not buying all these chemical inputs and chemical seeds and everything else. And so they start making more money within 2 or 3 years. Oftentimes their bottom line is 5x, within 5 years. So 500% improvement in profits is pretty good. And that gets you out of that crisis of the family farm very quickly. And so that has become a pattern in the United States, very common now. We've got tens of millions of acres that have made the transition to regenerative agriculture. And there's a number of different types of practices within regen. There's biodynamic farming, there's permaculture, there's new Korean farming. There's really cool techniques that are out there, and they are all kind of synergistic and similar in fashion. But in the U.S., we've used the term regenerative agriculture as kind of the catch term. Internationally, especially in Africa, India, and other places, agroforestry has become used as maybe that catch-all term where we start to respect these carbon cycles and nutrient density within soil and diverse plant life within our food systems. But whether it be agroforestry or regenerative, these farmers are starting to find an economic and nutrient wellness within these new practices of paying attention to soil rather than just crop yield as your only metric. And so that's been an encouraging journey. And the fun thing for me as a doctor is I get to see the same rebound of health in my patients as I do at the farm. And so we can see farms that have been destroyed over a 30-year period of antibiotics rebound in a single season if just in the fall they don't spray and they don't till. They let the soil recover just for that winter season. And then they don't spray in the spring and they let nature do its thing. And not only is the crop thriving that following year, they've got insects and butterflies and things that had just been gone from the farm for many, many years. And so the pollinators come back and the earthworms come back and within a single year. So the speed of recovery can be 20 times faster than the speed of damage. And I see a similar ratio in clinic. It takes 30, 40 years of an antimicrobial, anti-life diet to create a cancer. You reconnect that individual to nutrient density and that cancer cell can go away very quickly. And so that speed of recovery outpacing the speed of disease is really the only thing that we can hope for now, is that nature has designed herself to heal anything. She's already offered a solution for every problem that's ever occurred. She's never allowed an injury that she doesn't have an antidote for. And so if we turn to nature with that level of trust, we're going to quickly be able to reintegrate humans into biology on the planet. And we can become part of the solution for a green planet rather than part of the harm.
Honestly, I listen to a lot of health podcasts and I listen to a lot of wellness specialists. And just the fact that you told me now that just by a season, everything could be changed, that's just mind-blowing. It isn't really spoken about a lot. And I think, you creating that awareness now is just something that will really open people's mind, is that actually it isn't like we have lost all hope.
No.
Because people think that it's, soil's depleted, we've lost all hope, all the nutrition from food is depleted, what we're going to do, we should just eat the same way, get the same diseases throughout generation. But actually, just based on transforming just in one season alone, you can create a dramatic impact. And how are like the governments, for example, in the US, and I know I like to speak about the US because still a lot of the driving force in how other governments work and do things is also still based on how the US does a lot of things. And in many ways it's unfortunate. A wonderful thing, at least about the UAE, is that we banned glyphosate here. So we don't have that particular herbicide, which is incredible, but it doesn't mean that we don't have other kinds of pesticides.
Well, just to clarify that,
yes,
the UAE doesn't allow Roundup or glyphosate spraying on the land here.
Yes.
But all of their food imported is contaminated with it.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing. I mean, we're in an import culture.
95% of your food is brought in from outside. And so you're importing glyphosate through your food and water system.
Understood. And also, this is the reason why whenever I'm speaking to people in general, the clients that I work with, it's always best to eat farm-to-table food. We are getting a lot of farming that's been done here, local farming too. And sure, it's not a lot of the produce, but still it's always better to eat local than it is to eat imported. But, we live in a very challenging situation where we don't have that same farm-to-table experience like a lot of other countries are having. So still, like, how does somebody thrive in an environment like this opposed to an environment where you have a lot of farm-to-table produce? And, I would go to countries in Asia where I would really consume fresh fruit every single day. And my friend recently told me, like, she went to Thailand and she said, why is my bowel movement so much better when I'm in Asia than, for example, when I come back to the UAE and I'm constantly constipated? And that's the very reason. It's just so different in terms of what you're consuming there than what you're getting here. So in places like the UAE and many other countries in the world who are import culture, how do we eat better?
There's a lot of different levels of that. I would say in the household, one way to do it is actually just start to grow a little bit of food in your own home. And it can be as simple as like a mint plant. Like you don't have to have a piece of dirt even. Like just get a pot, grow mint in there, and every single day make sure you're engaging with that living plant. And so bite a couple leaves off of it in the morning, and there's a massive life force within food that hasn't been picked yet. And so if you literally just bite the mint off the plant, the life force within that can correct all kinds of amazing things in your body. And so it takes very little of nature to start this healing process. Homeopathy is, one of the most powerful medicines on earth, where it's really the water signature of life that you're getting in a homeopathic. There's the original mineral or nutrient that you're trying to deliver via the homeopathy is gone because of the dilutions. But it just takes a little bit of that intelligent water in a living life force thing to transmit an enormous amount of health. And so homeopathically, you can start to change your nutrition by just having a little bit of contact with nature each day. And so you can do it with a mint plant or a basil plant, or grow a tomato next to the basil. Like, it can be a slippery slope towards amazement at how easy it is to grow things. And the mint's nice because it's kind of bulletproof. Like, people will kill a tomato plant, hard to kill mint. So start easy and just ease yourself into the reality of like, why did I forget how to do this? Why wasn't I taught how to like sprout? You can do broccoli sprouts in 2 days, and you have an incredibly nutrient dense.
Do you sprout at home?
I do. And not only sprouting, fermentation. And so you can buy cabbage, and then you can, put it in a crock with water and a little bit of salt, and within 2 weeks you got an incredible pot of sauerkraut. And so that sauerkraut, or you put turnips in, you get sour Reuben. These foods, once fermented, you're breaking down the chemicals that are in there quite quickly. And so let the microbiome detox your food for you through the fermentation process. I think that your food program has kimchi built in. That's one of the powerhouses. I would say kimchi and miso are kind of the kings in the fermented world out there. Miso is in its class of its own, probably. A typical miso on the market in Japan is a 3-year ferment, but they really love their 7-year misos. In the United States, if you're getting an imported one, it's usually a 1-year ferment, but 1 year is a lot of life transformation in that food product. And so miso is so dense with nutrient density and diversity because of that long digestive turnover and iterative process of life within the fermentation. So miso was used actually to help prevent nuclear fallout poisoning during the cleanup of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. When the U.S. dropped those atom bombs, there was nations all over the place went in to try to do humanitarian relief, and they were out of there within 24 hours because they just couldn't. They were all nausea, vomiting, hair loss, skin falling off. The only team that stayed in there for 6 months was the Japanese team, and that Japanese team was strictly eating miso as their only food intake in those days. And so a high intake of that microbiome into their bodies, that microbial intelligence was detoxing nuclear waste. And we now know that's a Pseudomonas strain of bacteria that's able to remove nuclear isotopes from the bloodstream. And so you just can't underestimate the ability of nature, especially the microbiome, to correct the problems that we create.
How are we repopulating that bacteria? What do we do?
In fermentation, what you're doing ideally is getting it from the air. And so an air fermentation is where you have a crock, you cover it with a little bit of a towel that's air permeable. And so the bacteria, yeast, etc., coming in from the air are settling into the water and setting up a relationship with the food. And they start to digest the food over and over and over and over again. And so the fermentation process that's ideal is what we call wild fermentation, where it's the ecosystem around you that's reseeding the food, and then subsequently your body with not just the microbiome, but the intelligence of the medicine that the microbiome is producing through that iterative digestion of the food.
So something as simple as getting a mint plant at home is enough.
Start there. I really think it's where you begin. And once you start to feel that, and you start to feel real food in your body again, you become quite discerning. The next level of that is, a CSA or a farmer's market. A CSA goes under maybe different terms internationally, but you basically have a food box that you buy once a week. And so you sign up for a weekly box, and your local farmers are filling that box with whatever's in season right then, what's being picked that week. And so you're eating locally, you're eating seasonally, and suddenly you're reconnecting to a whole different level. So mint plant, fermentation, then get into your connection with your farmer locally. After that, then we need to start working on the really more macro problems that we have around centralization of mega farming. And that's really a processed food problem. And so by eliminating processed foods from your diet, you're doing just as much good to the whole food industry as you are by eating the mint plant. Stop eating the processed foods, packaged foods, and you're going to fundamentally change the food industry immediately. The economic force of that is super potent and felt immediately in the industry.
It's so difficult to get rid of the processed foods. Like, as soon as you go into the supermarket, that's the first thing you see. As soon as you go into a restaurant, the first thing they serve you is the bread, right? And it's always a push for processed. It's the easiest thing to get. It's the cheapest form of so-called nutrition for a lot of people. But, there's a lot of people who can't afford organic produce every single day. There's a lot of people who feel like they can't eat better because, for example, the challenges that a lot of people face here as expats is because we're an import culture, a lot of the things in terms of what we're spending in produce and food in general is a lot more expensive than in other countries, and people come here and they're feeling like they can't really afford to eat better. But really something as simple as what you talk about, getting a cabbage, fermenting it, a basil tree, mint plant, these things are a starting point to so many things that doesn't even cost so much. And how do you grow your own garden at home if you live in an apartment, which for the most part everyone lives in? It's a huge population that live in apartments in the UAE. Not everybody lives in a villa or a home where they can ground every day and kind of plant their own things, although a lot of people want to do that. So given the fact that we really want to make a change, you really want to make a change, there's a lot of people in the world now that want to create better farming practices, better food nutrient density, but we also need the backing of governments. And in many cases, it's very difficult to get them to back so many things that we want based on big pharma, big food. And it's only very recently that even the red dye has been banned. And it took them a very long time to get to a position where they were able to get that. The petitioning, the constant talk on social media, so many people backing that up, that pushed them in a corner to want to do that. How do you foresee governments, not just in the US and globally, who are resistant to change, be able to be a part of this global movement that you're trying to be a part of?
Ironically, as an American kind of born in a belief that democracy was the best form of government, I'm starting to realize that there probably is not actually pure democracy on the planet, and everything in the democratic space tends to be owned by corporations these days. And so we have corporatocracy and we have these oligarchies running the world. I don't think we have pure communism. I don't think we have pure capitalism. I don't think we have pure democracies. They're all been perturbed or manipulated by artificial markets and control markets and centralization of power and money. And so for that, governments are probably going to have to go through an evolution themselves to become part of the solution ultimately. The ones that will be slowest to make those changes will be the democracies, and I think that the ones that will be fastest to make these changes are the ones that are basically totalitarian, governments.
Like the UAE,
and so where you've got total control of the decision making. It can be in the Middle East, or it can be Putin in Russia. You've got these individuals that can make incredible decisions on the spot, and they get applied nationwide immediately. That's probably where we're going to have to begin the journey, is those countries need to start to understand the level of crisis we're in. And just in Saudi and helping them come to terms with the fact that they're now publishing within their own scientific literature 69% infertility rates in women in North Saudi. And so this rate is so insane. This is a higher level of infertility than I've seen anywhere else. If that plays out through the Middle East, which we already talked about the fertility crisis here in the UAE, but as it's playing out, you only got about 40 years left of this civilization as we understand it today. And so you've got decades, a few short decades, to make some radical changes to try to recover this process. When the Saudi government saw those numbers, which none of them had seen, published in their own scientific journals, and this is part of the problem, is science is not being story told to governments or regulators in the way that they understand it. And so the science is there that we are going extinct, Nobody's seen the science, and when we're instead talking about CO2 in the atmosphere,
40 years.
yeah, we're talking about global
Mind-blowing.
warming instead of like the fundamental collapse of human fertility every day. Like that should probably make headlines instead of which rocket did we shoot into the air, how many satellites did we put up, or what's our GDP. Who the freak cares if we can't have children? And so we're at this crisis moment, and I think these governments, we're going to see Saudi in the Middle East and Russia and some of these countries continue to lead the charge. As I mentioned earlier, Russia's already leading the charge on organic food production. They see the writing on the wall. They don't have to worry about the United States as any kind of enemy. They just have to wait. If they wait 2 more decades, the United States wiped itself out with its own food system. They don't have to go to war with the U.S. They just are waiting for the U.S. to peter out completely, and they're winning the game because they've waited long enough for our U.S. dollar to collapse. And so right now, unfortunately, these capitalistic, democracies are going to be the slowest to change. And it will be these countries that can make fast, sweeping changes to their food systems that will be the fastest to recover their health systems, that will be fastest to create the resilient economies of the future. And those resilient economies of the future are going to have to be based in the soils of the region. And so what we're talking to with governments in the UAE, Saudi, and beyond, and a lot of work in Africa right now with Project Biome, is realizing that governments can actually create investment incentives and start to tie their own economic valuations to these outputs of soil and food systems. And for that, we can start to map a near future where the grasslands of North Africa and the grasslands of Saudi Arabia and the UAE go green again. And you guys start producing your own food very quickly. So in the first stages, there needs to be investment in African soil systems so that the African continent starts to come back to life. Africa comes back to life, the whole world comes back to life. All life has always happened in Africa. First bacteria, first fungi, first humans, it doesn't matter. Every rebirth happens on this longitude that used to be called Zep Tepi, or original time, all the way back to ancient Egyptian writings. Zep Tepi runs up the west coast of Africa, basically, from South Africa through the Ethiopian Rift Valley, through Cairo, Egypt, through Alexandria, which was the biggest food-producing place in the world just under the Roman Empire just a few hundred years ago. The desert wasn't the desert. It was a massive grasslands 2,000 years ago, and then it got taken over for the food production of all of Europe and beyond by the Roman Empire. So they were in what's now the Sahara Desert. It was the biggest olive groves, the biggest wheat fields in the world were being grown there because it was green. There were animals throughout it. There was massive lakes. The largest lake in the world's dead center of what's now the Sahara Desert, Lake Chad. All of those lakes are coming back to life right now. In the last 4 months, we're seeing these lakes start to fill again because the water table is shifting, because the dynamics of the planet are going back into this generative cycle where the deserts are going to regreen. Threatening that recovery is human activity. And so these governments that will make the decisions are going to be ultimately Saudi and UAE, because they've got the economic clout to change the dynamics of Africa right now. And so what I'm trying to talk to all these governments about now is let's make a phase 1 investment in organic permaculture and agroforestry in Africa. Let's get land bridges built so the elephants can start to move. The elephants are the architects of the rivers. 300,000 elephants have overpopulated Botswana in recent years. That makes me believe that nature is mounting a recovery.
Wow.
And when those elephants start to march and they're going to go up those ley lines that they have always gone up, those river systems will start to flow again. Those lakes will refill, not just because of the elephants, but because of the changing polarity of the planet. The poles are shifting on the planet as it does on cycle. And when the poles shift, the water table rises in North Africa. And so we're seeing evidence just in the last 4 months that this is alive and an exciting path forward. And if the Middle East will get into this process with us and start to invest there, it won't be long before the Middle East is a food-sustained and food-independent region because it's growing its own soil systems again. And so they've already got tree planting in place, and I'm trying to encourage governments to stop planting trees in the desert. That's not what creates the recovery. It's grasslands. So start digging holes. If you dig terrain to have little swales or even just a single little shovel deep hole, if you do thousands of those in a small region, you get regreening very quickly. Water retention increases, microbiome, seed banks come back up out of the deserts. And so recovery is just moments away. 3-year recoveries is done in the desert all the time now. And so within this decade, we could see a regreening of North Africa and the Middle East, and by 2030 we're talking about how much food are we growing right outside of Dubai instead of how far are you bringing your food from.
I'm happy to still be alive in this generation then.
It's the most exciting time to be alive.
Totally, I agree. It's the most exciting time to be alive. I speak about this all the time, and I did mention it to you earlier that my son developed a neurological disorder when he was younger, and of course, misdiagnosis from conventional medicine had made me frustrated with the way conventional medicine treats not just children, but also the misdiagnosis has been causing a lot of dramatic illness globally. We live, as mentioned earlier, in an import culture where even though glyphosate and these herbicides as pesticides are banned here, we're importing them every day. And glyphosate in general is, destroying our neural pathways. We're seeing a rise in ADHD, autism, massive autism rates in the region on its own. I have friends who have autistic kids, and it isn't even about just what they're consuming. It's more like an epigenetic generational curse that's been happening now, where us as adults are being consuming this and we're passing it on to our children. So that's what's currently happening. And because a lot of the people these days don't really understand that, parents or current parents or those aspiring to become parents don't even realize that they're carrying this toxic load in their body, that just by that alone, you're birthing toxins to your children. How do we combat that? Is there a way that we can reverse that now? What is the detox that people can do from that level where we can kind of detox ourselves every single day from these herbicides and pesticides that we don't know we're consuming?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the detox industry has become a multi-billion-dollar movement, and it's because we are carrying a lot of toxins in the body. My laboratory, starting in 2012, started studying the role of herbicides in opening up the gates to create that detoxification of the body. And the gates are the tight junctions of the gut lining, and glyphosate damages those tight junctions on contact. And so within seconds of a meal, your gut lining is falling apart, and all these chemicals and nutrients, heavy metals, are coming into the body unfiltered, unregulated. And so you get toxification of the body through a leaky gut. As soon as you get the leaky gut injury, we've been able to show in our laboratory that the blood-brain barrier and the vascular tree falls apart, kidney tubules fall apart. And so it's leaky gut, leaky brain, leaky vascular, leaky kidney. At that point, the body cannot remove toxins. So this is why it's easy to build a billion-dollar industry, is you're basically sucking up toxins for a few days through whatever detox protocol you might be on. And the whole time, your body continuing to absorb those same toxins. So we started looking at that root cause and root solution in 2010-11 as how is nature doing this? How does nature start to rebuild these systems? If nature can rebuild a farm in a single year, what's happening? What's actually happening in the soil? What's actually happening in the root fiber? What's actually happening in the human gut? When you see a patient go from autoimmune disease to no autoimmune disease in a month, what's happening there? And the answer was soil contact. And so we were basically using fossil soils to find some base of soil intelligence that hasn't been damaged by chemical farming and before that mechanical farming. For the last 1,000 years, we've been deteriorating soils globally through farming practices even before chemicals. Chemicals has been like the fire show, but we've been doing overplowing of our soils for 1,000 years. And so there's been this constant decline in soil intelligence around the earth. Right now, we're at 97% of the farmable lands globally are severely depleted of nutrients. So we went back to 60 million year old soil, which predates the last extinction, which was also caused by a death of topsoil, incidentally. And so going back to this really deep, dense soil system that existed at that point, we started extracting carbon molecules made by bacteria and fungi. And so that engineering process that we built in 2012 ended up resulting in a novel approach to supplementation, which is soil supplementation. So instead of giving you a bunch of calcium or magnesium or whatever it is, instead we're giving you the carbon soil systems that deliver nutrients across membranes and start to accelerate the protein synthesis and repair processes within biologic systems. So that product became known as ION, which stands for Intelligence of Nature. But what we were able to show as far back as 2012 is that within minutes of touching the gut lining, these soil molecules are actually reversing the glyphosate damage. And so Nature's already developed a solution for everything, and in this case, she developed a solution in which she's accelerating the rate of amino acid integration and protein synthesis of the tight junctions. So within minutes of ion hitting the gut lining, you see increased tight junctions. With increased tight junctions, you're giving the immune system rest, and so inflammation is going down. We've been able to show many molecular pathways being supported by these carbon molecules, including huge upregulation of glutathione, downregulation of inflammatory lipopolysaccharides. So all of these inflammatory cascades are correcting almost overnight because you've got the carbon soil system back in place in the human, just as you would on a farm field that's recovering from chemical farming. Get that carbon cycle going back again, and now you've stopped the leak of toxins into the body. And so the best way to detox in my box is stop toxifying. And so to do that, you get the tight junctions in place. So ION's become our foundation. We launched the product to the autistic community in 2014, and it was immediately, within months, we had it in 40,000 families worldwide with autism, and it was unbelievable what these kids were showing us about the role of human biology in soil. These kids were improving so rapidly.
Wow.
And it wasn't the supplement doing anything. The supplement doesn't actually do anything to the human body. What it's doing is creating the communication network for the cells to be able to talk to each other. And as soon as you restore communication, everything starts to repair. And so it's not the supplement fixing anything. It's the supplement empowering your body to its own regenerative capacity for detoxification, for repair and regeneration. And so now we've followed those cellular pathways. Our lab is cranking out new science every week for the last 15 years, and it gets more and more interesting because we're able to dissect out all these different protein signaling pathways and everything else. We've been able to show activation of stem cells, activation and deactivation of senescent cells, which are like kind of stuck cells that are weighing down your biologic metabolism. And so you can eliminate the senescent cells. Apoptosis kicks in and damaged cells that are too damaged to repair. And so you got this cleanup process going, and all you're doing is adding back soil. And so by reconnecting human biology to intelligent soil systems from fossil soils, we're getting this reactivation of biology that frankly has never been seen in my laboratories or any. Our scientists in my lab combined, we've got about 150 years of benchtop research between us. None of us ever knew this was possible up until the moment we saw human cells reintegrating human soil intelligence. Because all of our petri dish experiments to understand disease are done in sterile environments. We didn't know that human biology could repair itself so quickly and so effectively. And so even the supplement industry, I think, is about to be replaced by this concept of soil nutrient delivery is the future. And if we start building our understanding of that, we'll transition from supplements to food systems again. I hope my supplement company goes out of business in the next 10 years because we've done such a good job getting soil regeneration going. If we get good quality soils going globally, there's nobody in the world that will need my supplements or any other supplements in the world. The concept of supplementing food is ludicrous. Nature's been feeding herself for 4 billion years. She wasn't waiting for humans to come along to create dietary supplements. So nutrition health, we need to look back to the plants to get the plants there. We're going to look back to soil to get that going. We need a relationship between governments, industry, farmers, and consumers to all adopt new metrics of value, new metrics of wealth based on our nutrient delivery and density. And so that's been kind of the journey with that. ION has been able to show its ability to accelerate detox pathways in the body as well. All of that led to the closure of my clinic, because what happened is I started to realize that everything else that I was offering in clinic outside of the human body was distracting my patients from their ability to heal from nature. So instead, we started something called Journey of Intrinsic Health. And the concept is every human has within itself the intrinsic pathways to repair and regenerate, to live lives like my great-grandparents did. My great-grandfather on my dad's side, on my mom's side rather, and my great-grandmother on my dad's side, both lived over 100 years. And so I got to know them as my great-grandparents. My kids got to know them as their great-great-grandparents. That was a phenomenal thing to see that many generations living together and enjoying one another's presence and getting the wisdom out of one another, and being able to see that trickle down. The wealth of generational living is so beyond this. And this is what all the blue zones have shown. Blue zones are not commonly living past 100 years because of their food. They're living past it because of multi-generational families. And so multi-generational living and that diversity of living systems, meaning the community is always curious to know who else it can connect with. And so it's not nuclear families. It's the aunties, the uncles, and all of the non-relatives that you call aunties and uncles everywhere, Anyway, that's the culture of Hawaii. I love for that. If you're on the island and you're male, you're an uncle. If you're on the island and you're a female, you're an auntie. I just love that. That's brilliant. That's the interconnectedness that would lead to a sense of value within community systems. That would be the social version of a diverse soil system, And so these are the values that I think are really sitting in front of us as an opportunity to really pivot. And like I said, I think this part of the world, because of its economic position, can start this journey for us. We can really all come around these big economies and start to pivot this. And your government and Saudi are able to make these decisions on a dime and really pivot their entire healthcare systems through a food system that reconnects. And it can go like wildfire. I'm absolutely convinced that we do not need to go extinct in the next 50 years. We're on track right now to have a sperm count of 0 on this planet by 2050. And I don't think we need that path. I think we got 25 years of decline can be averted next year if we do the right thing by our soils.
So are you saying that the only way to detox on glyphosate is through your supplement currently? Do you solely believe that your supplement ion, and I want to try it out, by the way.
Yeah.
So I need to get some from you, but
I would say that anytime you can just reconnect to soil is the concept. Again, I'm hoping the supplement goes out of business because people are living in dense soil systems.
How are people going to reconnect with soil?
It's kind of through what we just talked about. So you talked about apartments.
From a place like here, yeah. Just through that one, just as simple as that.
Grow some food.
As simple as that.
That's just connecting to soil.
That's it. So it's
and
a detox
that mint plant that's in organic soil on your porch, that thing is carrying the same stuff that's in my supplements.
Right.
It takes so little soil
right.
to do this miracle. The only reason there's a supplement on the market is that people don't even have a clue on how to start a mint plant right now. And they're like, well, I just travel too much for the mint plant. Well, I can relate to that. Travel my butt off. Yeah. But I've learned how to stay in my friends' houses when I travel. And my friends are increasingly realizing that they're going to value food over everything. And so I'm blessed to travel from place to place all over the world, eating some of the best food on the planet, because us as a community are starting to value this. And we are taking each other to our garden plots out back when we land in each other's houses, rather than taking each other to the 5-star restaurant. We're taking each other up the street to the farmer's market instead of going to the movies. So our entertainment is starting to be reintegration of nature, and that excites me. And that's the community I am living in and excited to invite other people into. It feels good to visit farms all over the place, and I've probably walked more farms than certainly any other doctor on the planet. But it is such a lifestyle, and you cannot be frustrated at humans for very long if you are meeting farmers. These people are freaking amazing. They get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, they work their asses off until 10 o'clock in the night, and they get up in the next morning and do the thing again. The relentless energy that goes into farming is phenomenal. And what makes a happy farmer is them getting to witness nature going into her abundance around them. That is not how most farmers are living their lives right now. Most farmers are eking out less and less life from their efforts in a more and more intense dependence on chemicals. When you divorce the chemical model and you go ahead and move back into a belief of life, whether you be a patient with breast cancer or a farmer in the farm field, you're going to see life reconnect. And the cancer cells will reconnect just as the damaged soil system will reconnect. Cells will reconnect if given the opportunity, but to do that, you have to stop the toxins, and then you have to give back a little bit of soil metabolism. So I don't think there's another product in the market that stops the toxicity like ion. Other detox products will again, they can pull toxin out of the bloodstream for a few minutes, but it literally is like a few minutes of effect, right? And so if you take something like glutathione in the bloodstream lasts for 1/millionth of a second. So you did an anti-inflammatory interaction for 1/millionth of a second. That might move the needle for some few cells in your body, but then 1 second later, you're back in the same situation with the same toxins, the same inflammatory cascade and everything else, because you haven't gone upstream to figure out that it was the disconnect from soil systems that began your journey. And so until we make soil the foundation of human health, all of the biohacking in the world is just a good marketing campaign and making billions of dollars, but it's not fixing the problems. It's palliating the problems at best. And it's just kind of obvious in the end, maybe when we back up. Like some colleagues of mine just started this biohacking center in Santa Monica, California. So they're, 5 blocks from one of the best beaches in the world. And you walk in and they've got this whole flooring system that is amazing. It's beautiful to look at. And they're like, take your shoes off and walk on this. I'm like, what's going on in this? Like, well, it's like ground crystal. And it's giving you exactly the same benefits that walking on a beach does. I was like, wait, how much money, why am I paying to get in here? There's a beach just like 5 blocks up there. I should probably be on that beach. And they're like, well, you need to be in here because there's a red light here. And if you stand in front of this red light, it gives you 670 nanometer and you'll detox your body for mitochondrial metabolism. And actually, if I just go back to that beach and go through one sunset, I'll get the entire red spectrum all through my entire body for free at millions of times the efficacy that this single bandwidth of red light is doing. So this is what we do technologically, is we are so reductionist that we forget that nature has already done all of this. Else there wouldn't be life. If she didn't know how to detox the body, we would be dead. We would have never occurred. The periodic chart is mostly toxins. The vast majority of the periodic chart is toxins. What makes it non-toxic is life. Biology has figured out how to transmute the elements into life force energy. Where we start to develop toxicity again is when we take the life out of the periodic chart and suddenly the minerals on that periodic chart are becoming poisons again. And so when you take life force out of the sunshine and turn it into a nuclear bomb, you've got a weapon. If you take the life force out of the sunshine and put it into a single bandwidth of red light, you're going to die in a dark room with a red light on. There's not time for us to keep trying to technologically replace nature. It's too complex. It's too beautiful. It iterated for 4 billion years to allow us to occur. We've got to rely on that data bank of information. That is the science I trust now, is 4 billion years of science. 4 billions of science, call it life. I don't trust a pharmaceutical industry that says here's a new non-natural chemical that's going to solve your disease. It's impossible. It's literally the wrong, question, premise, philosophy. The whole thing is, and I did that for most of my life. And I was a chemotherapy development doc, giving my chemotherapy to patients day in, day out, telling them this was their only path. I've been there. I know what it feels like as a doctor because you're desperately trying to help the people that you are taking care of. You're just given a toolbox that fundamentally cannot get them across the line that you're trying to get them to. And so this is the journey that we're all in now, is can we let go of a technologic future for a few minutes so that we can live into a biologic reality? The technologic future will not cure us. It will lead us into transhumanism for a few more decades until we're gone. Transhumanism for a few decades or thousands of years of biologic life force ahead of us, because we start to align with soil system and the earth suddenly takes the deepest breath she's ever taken. And that is the reality. It will be a greener earth than it's ever been very, very soon.
The problem is there's just so much information online. So much. And for the average person who is not even in the health space, knows nothing about health, relies on just their GP that they've had from family that have been passed on to them, who they trust fully, they don't know what to believe. So really, this conversation is super, super important, because people need to know the truth about how to heal from disease, how to detox from chemicals, how to live better with just simple changes in their life. And the fact that you say that there's a biohacking center literally right next to the beach is that we're really losing touch as humans to what life is truly about. It's more about, hey, the latest trend is about biohacking, so let's create a biohacking center, opposed to, hey, let's wait a minute. Let's just educate people a bit more on true health, which is the beach, which is the ocean, which is breathing fresh air. It's just completely switched. We're losing touch to who we truly are as people, and it's actually devastating to hear that. And it's devastating that us as humans are no longer in touch with who we truly are because of everything that we're seeing online and everything that we think we should have, and literally true health is in nature, as you say. Going back to the topic on glyphosate and the fact that that has really changed the game in how we look at health, how it's destroying our health, and also the topic on antibiotics and how that has caused like a massive shift on our microbiome, how our pharmaceutical driven drugs have really changed the way that we point of our testosterone levels, our fertility levels. Antibiotics are not going away. They're going to be there for a while. And pharmaceutical drugs and pharmaceutical companies will still be there for I don't know how long. How are we going to combat this for someone that has no clue on what to do with themselves? How their doctor and their GP are constantly promoting antibiotics, constantly promoting birth control pills in the younger generation. People are taking birth control pills to heal acne. This is what doctors are prescribing. They prescribed that to me when I had cystic acne well into my 30s, and I just didn't want to take them. And young women are now no longer able to get pregnant. They're getting menopause really early. They're even developing breast cancer in their 30s.
20s.
Even in their 20s.
Yeah, we've got breast cancer in their 20s.
That's how crazy it is in their 20s. So how are we going to help the younger generation understand how to eliminate antibiotics, the use of antibiotics in their life? What's the best way?
I mean, honestly, it just takes a weekend outside in nature to begin the journey. It's that simple. You will start to feel yourself if you get out into a natural system. I guess something I don't talk about on podcasts enough is human touch. It's such a rapid pathway back to reality. An interesting study published recently showed that 80% of American men haven't been hugged in a year.
Wow.
And when you start to extrapolate that out to a global population, in the UAE, hugging is seen as socially unacceptable anyways. And so actually he was speaking at the wellness festival at the UAE. It was the first time I got instructions that I wasn't supposed to talk about spirituality or show any physical touch, and no hugs after the talk, and so
wow.
That kind of blew up because there was so much love in that room that everybody just started hugging each other spontaneously at the end of that talk. So it was, I guess I broke the rules, but they were hugging each other for the record. And so it was interesting to move into this space. But what happens when a human body isolates is it can no longer see itself. And so we need one another to be able to see ourselves. And another way of saying that is we can't feel ourselves without human touch. And so in the physical isolation of being human right now, and you can go into any restaurant and watch it, you got couples that are out on a date and they're both looking at their phones and not even realizing the other person's there in some ways. That physical isolation that technology tends to do to us, and biohacking is a good example of it. You go to any biohacking place and it's you're gonna be in this little chamber for 2 hours and you get this drip and you're alone reading your Instagram feed for 2 hours, getting stuff put in your veins. Probably not a pathway to health. What we really need to do is just start to touch each other more. And what I used in my clinic was the hug, a really open-hearted hug, which takes time to learn how to do because we've got so many social programs up to hide from each other. But if you just relax, really learn how to relax, that's how you open your heart. Just relax your body, let it move back into parasympathetic. So get used to putting somebody in your arms and then relaxing. And if you can do that for 15 seconds, the amount of information that transmits between those two bodies is enormous because you're both these massive electromagnetic fields, which is to say basically quantum computers that are exchanging information through the electromagnetic field, through the pheromones, through chemical processes, neurochemical processes. It is so much information so quick. 15 seconds and 30 seconds into a hug, serotonin levels are going up, dopamine levels are going up, your ability to feel pleasure is going up. And so the food that you're about to eat after the hug is going to taste so much better because you actually got a human touch in on it. And again, this is what the blue zones are showing, is families that are together around food is so much more important than what the food is. So how do we deal with food when it's so toxic and we are disconnected? You better just start hugging everybody a lot more before you sit down for the food and start transmuting those toxins before they even get into your body by up-leveling the energetics of your body through a hug. And so get that physical touch back in, hold each other's hands, make love to each other again. This is not, I just think that when we pierce the veil and we go past it and we look back at the human condition, if we have a heart left to break, we will utterly break our heart for the way in which we lived our lives because we we were so close to the opportunity to feel everything, and we numbed ourselves out, and we didn't touch each other, and we ate chemical foods that didn't have flavor, and that was our experience. And that is a precious thing to waste, a human life. And when I say waste, I'm talking about the lack of sensation, lack of pleasure. That's how you waste a human life, is block its ability to experience pleasure. And there's nothing more beautiful and free than human touch to get there. And so my hope is that we have a whole hell of a lot less biohacking in 5 years, and we're sitting in nursing homes and starting to take our elders out of those nursing homes and hold their hands instead of biohacking. Hold the hand of your elder before you take a vitamin C drip, and decide if that's really your path to health after you've held the hand of your elder. Sit on the ground and play with your nieces and nephews for a few hours before you decide that you need to get to the gym and do the thing. Feel humans around you, and then reevaluate the way in which you're vitalizing your life or paying for stuff. It will fundamentally change us. And I don't know which way we go. In some ways, I've become a little bit agnostic to it. If we go extinct, that's beautiful because we had an amazing human experience altogether. What my hope is if we die or if we live, we do it awake and touching each other and holding each other. Because the hospice journey, which was my third subspecialty, was absolutely beautiful. And I have never seen a death done well that wasn't a rebirth. It's not an endpoint. Death is not an endpoint. Whole cultures know this. West has forgotten this. It's fear, guilt, shame. We're fear of death. We feel guilty or shamed as doctors if we didn't make the person live, if death wins. Death is this re-beginning process, and it's a beautiful journey ultimately. And it's something you're expanding into something that's so unimaginably bigger than a human body when you let go of that body. And so we need to lose the fear of death so that we start to live better. And when we live better, we will be more connected and more whole in one another's comfort and our ability to hold each other. And I think we need to do this in an extreme way. I think that we need to hold each other, as community, not just like trying to find your Valentine. We're recording this on Valentine's Day. This whole nuclear family and try to find your better half, and you better find your partner because they're scarce out there. That is the most toxic stuff on the planet. Like, way worse than glyphosate is the belief that love is scarce. We need to break out of our relational models, and we need to start to touch everybody again. And for that, we would build a different society. And we will touch each other in such reverence when we actually stop and listen to one another and really hold each other's hands in such a way that we can actually feel the energy that comes along with the words. And more important, the energy that happens between the words. What is this person actually feeling? What's their actual experience? When you actually get into any of those conversations with anybody, everybody's having multidimensional realities. They can feel their ancestors. They can feel the future. They can feel angels. They're hearing spirits. They think there's non-humans. They're like, whatever it is. Like, it's unbelievable what people are experiencing and not talking about because they don't know how to feel and they don't know how to communicate, feel to somebody next to them. They certainly are afraid to touch one another or forgotten how to do it. So it's going to be a journey, and humans don't change direction unless there's crisis. So here we are in our crisis, and so thank God for the crisis. And most of my cancer patients in my clinic over the years would, a year or two in, always tell me I had cancer was the best thing that ever happened in my life because I'm now living my life. I was numbed out and not paying attention. I was doing all the things that I would have been so sad to die having done. Now I'm living the life I want to live because this cancer came along. So this fundamental hospice moment that we are in as a species, in a decade, we could look back and be like, thank God we did the chronic disease epidemic. Thank God we took ourselves to near extinction with our fertility because it forced us to reintegrate with a nature that was helping us move from this scarcity model, this abandonment disorder, back into a reintegrated process of understanding that nature is abundant and she abundantly loves us, and we are the result of this frequency that is generative in nature that we might call love, for the capacity to see beauty. It's a juggernaut, and I get, like, right now I just feel so much in my body that I wish I could just keep talking forever in some ways, but I wish I could just stop talking right now and just give everybody a hug that's listening right now, because if you could feel my body right now, you would have all the information you need to know that you are beautiful. You are a miracle. You have everything inside of you to regenerate to your original design that you created yourself with in your mother's womb. You have everything inside of you right now to reconnect to source that you will realize yourself never divorced from once you cross the veil of death again. Die right now to everything that you're afraid of. Die right now to the fear, the guilt, the shame, and start to just forgive everything. Forgive everything inside of your body. Forgive everything that's happened to your body. Forgive the chemical companies. Forgive the industries of pharmacy and whatever else is out there. We got to forgive all of it, because it was a part of the human journey, and it was a necessary part of the journey to get us right now to reconnect to one another, reconnect to ourselves, reconnect to the nature within us and around us, to become whole again. And so this is my virtual hug to all of you. It's all inside of you. It's all always been inside of you. You are complete. You are enough. You're ready to go live again. Let's go regenerate this planet.
So beautiful. Like, I just felt that, and I'm getting goosebumps just by that alone.
That's a good hug.
You know, the moment you walked in, you gave me a really massive hug. And I told you, like, I'm a hugger. So my love language is physical touch, words of affirmation. And regardless what this test of love languages test, give you as a result, we all want human connection. And it made me think a lot about what happened to my dad and him being diagnosed with cancer, and him going through this journey of wanting to live longer the moment that he found out that he was sick. And like you said, it's through crisis that we really are able to connect to our true self. And it's a shame that we have to wait until we get disease to really realize how to truly live. But my father showed me a love that I've never experienced in my whole life, and probably will never experience in my entire life. And it is because of him I am the person I am today, because he showed me a side that I could never feel anywhere else than what I felt with him. The bond that I had with this incredible man is unlike anything that I've ever experienced in human existence. However, what it taught me is that we can lose life so easily. At a blink of an eye, we can just lose them. And if we're not grateful every single day with everything that we have, whether it's a nod in the corridor or whether it's just a hello, we're forgetting that the important thing about human life is human connection. And this is why I am all about love and happiness and joy and positivity. And regardless if we're consistently consumed by negativity every single day, I have found the joy in positivity and turning that negative situation to something positive always, because I understand what it's like to lose a life. I understand what disease does to people. And it's been so many decades that I've lost my father, but it doesn't really matter, because he carries a place in me that I can't forget what it was like to see him in that deathbed. And you have so many similar situations, because you haven't just seen cancer once. You've seen it hundreds and thousands of times, and people in their deathbed just wishing to stay alive. For you, what is your biggest takeaway from those that are dying? For you, you see it as a rebirth. For you, you see it as reincarnation. But for those people who are listening to this right now, what's the one biggest takeaway that you have seen from these cancer patients that you would love to share right now?
Cancer is a description of the loneliest cell in the body. And so you can't get a cancer cell to occur unless it's completely disconnected from all of its neighbors. And so it's that total isolation that leads to cancer at the cellular level. And I believe the same thing happens at the macro level in society. When we isolate our elders in nursing homes, they go psychotic. When we isolate our prisoners, they go psychotic. When we isolate our children, they perpetrate school shootings. We become the cancer cell when we are in isolation. And so what I've learned from all of the cancer that I've been around in my life is that we have to slow down and reconnect, or we will be the problem on the planet as well as to one another. And so we will continue to suck the energy out of Mother Earth until our own extinction occurs if we don't reconnect. And so a cancer cell in its disconnection will destroy a system by draining its energy. We've got to reconnect before we drain the energy out of the biology of this planet if we're going to prevent the completion of this extinction that we're engineering. At the single individual level, this looks a lot like presence. I feel lonely right up until I stop thinking and start to fully embody in my physical being and start to feel what my toes feel like, and feel what my back feels like, what my arms feel like, feel what my chest feels like, where are my lungs at right now, feel what my tension level in my eyes are. Lay down on the ground underneath a tree, look up through there and relax completely, and you feel that reset happen, and that is called presence. And so this opportunity that cancer is an invitation to is presencing, because as soon as you're present underneath that tree, laying on your back, looking at the sky, you will feel reconnected. And that reconnection begins at that witnessing the beauty of nature in a lot of ways. And so slow down, become present to see the beauty around you, and you'll realize you are anything but alone. You are actually highly engaged by nature. She is stimulating every nerve in your body with the air that whistles across your skin, with the energy that's in the grass that's prickling your back, with the soil that's beneath your toes, or the sand that's under your feet, or the ocean water that's lapping at your ankles. Nature is so centrally engaged with you. You are not alone. If you are an earthling, you are not alone. You are in a connected nature that thrives within you and around you and is trying to make you feel alive. There is no loneliness. There is no disconnect if we slow down and become present. The only place that's actually isolated and truly disconnected in this world is the human mind. We have divorced ourselves from nature only in our minds. No matter how lonely we think we are from nature, no matter how rejected we think we are from nature, we are not. The body continues to thrive as a natural system. It's only in the loneliness of a human mind that disease really occurs. And so become present, witness beauty around you, breathe in that beauty, start to feel the way in which nature is engaging every breath you take, the water you're drinking, the food you're tasting. Start to be present with that, and it will be your journey back into a reconnected reality, and you'll start to make all of your decisions differently. You'll start to make decisions for more connection, not less. You'll make decisions for more community, not less. And that community may not be human right now. Human community can be quite toxic because of its disconnected state. And when we hang out with one another in disconnected states, we can do great harm to one another. And so it may look like a walk in the woods alone is the way in which you can be most reconnected to community, because suddenly the birds are singing to you. An incredible experiment was just shown that the bird song in each region of the earth has developed to be able to interact with the pores in the surface of the trees in that region. The bird song in every region of the world opens the pores on the surface of the tree so it can breathe more oxygen, more CO2, and start that cycle of life for us again. If the bird songs can open the pores of respiration and breath in trees, imagine what it's doing for your human body. Nature, in its sounds, in its vibrations, in its beauty, is going to turn your body back on. It's going to increase your metabolic function regardless of the food you're eating, regardless of the toxicity of humans around you. Nature is always going to be up-leveling your experience, up-leveling your capacity to be alive. And so reintegrate there and do it aggressively. Get really viral about nature. Make sure that all of your activities with your friends are somehow reactivating nature, your family, gatherings. Let's do them in nature now. And this is what I do appreciate about desert culture out here in the UAE and Saudi and the rest of this region is there are tents all over the place that get rented out, and people go out in the desert with their families at night, and they start a fire, and they sit there at night in the desert, and they experience the wonderment of the stars in the desert. That's still a culturally normal and appropriate way to spend time. That's not happening very many places in the world left. And so the Middle East has got a couple of examples of that are really holding on to some beauty that will allow the world to reconnect if the world would follow such a demonstration of integration into nature. What's happening in Saudi Arabia right now is unbelievable as they start to rethink entire urban centers into green systems of connected indigenous plant life. That wasn't happening 10 years ago. And so unexpected genius is coming from humans right now as we start to witness the beauty of nature and start to value that in our economies. And if Saudi Arabia as an oil company is starting to basically pivot from oil country to soil country, from technologic isolation to biologic familial reconnection, that's a pathway for all of us in the UAE here. he's got a bit of a bigger journey, because there was such a technological boom that happened here in the last 20 years that it can be difficult to believe that you've done something that's not good. It can be difficult to believe when the whole world is telling you you're the most successful city in the world, to believe that it should change directions is hard. And so success in the current abstract economies that are separating us from nature will slow the reintegration process. And so in some ways it'll be hopefully our rural communities that find their path way back. And then the value of those communities will go up when people within the cities realize, you know what, I actually don't want to live like this. And I would like to be able to walk outside and feel the sun shine on my skin and breathe clean air and eat food from my backyard garden. I'm going to actually go buy a rural property instead. And all over the UAE in the last week, I'm hearing that people living in high rises are buying farms all around here and starting to grow food. Wow. It's happening.
That's my goal.
It's
I
happening.
Definitely want to do that.
It's
I
happening.
definitely want to own my own farm and grow my own produce and live by the farm. That's the end goal. So, cancer. What's the one thing?
I think I answered it, but it's become present.
It's
Reconnect.
Becoming present.
You got to lay down under that tree. You got to reconnect to nature for that moment. Cancer cells cannot reconnect if they don't get fed by the environment around it.
Do you think we can heal cancer without chemo?
Cancer repairs itself all the time. Chemotherapy is such a small part of anything around the reality of cancer, and that's an ex-chemotherapy guy telling you that. But poisoning a cell can never take it into health, and that took me a long time to figure that out. Yeah. I don't know why. That seems pretty obvious when I say it that clearly, but poisoning cells is not a pathway to health. Nourishment is a process of reconnection, and if you stay lonely and you decide you're just a lonely cell, you actually can't get nourished, and so you will continue to be the cancer in your environment. And so if your narrative, which mine has been much of my life, is that I have a hard time receiving and nobody loves me, and we all have these little chip on our shoulder victim stories that run inside of us, and I serve everybody, and I don't. It's all BS. It's all just a head game going on. I receive so much from this global community. I receive so much from Mother Earth every day. I receive so much from my own capacity to feel my body. I receive so much life force and design from my own soul that I forget about. There's so much loving me into existence right now, and it's only the stories that keep me separate from that. And so presencing yourself within nature can help you start to let go of the human stories that are creating the loneliness and isolation that's driving your dis-ease of life and your acceleration of death. And it's time that we take the time to become present and stop chasing a future that is taking us further from nature. We got to reintegrate, and we won't know how to reintegrate unless we become present. And so all of the current technologies that are being said, well, we're going to be okay because we'll have robots farming for us. No, that actually doesn't improve sperm counts at all. We will improve the situation when humans are walking on soil again. And when their bodies are reconnected to the microbiome of soil again.
I watched a movie recently on Netflix, and it was based on a true story. I don't know how much of that was a true story, but it was a couple of girls who developed cancer and decided they didn't want to go through chemotherapy. And there were these clinics in Mexico that do these detoxing, the natural ways of healing through Mother Nature, through Mother Earth. What are your thoughts on that? Is that the way forward?
I mean, there's only that what you described is the only way forward. We have to reintegrate with nature, and we'll do that by where we are putting our feet, the food we're drinking, the water we're bathing in, the chemicals we're putting on our bodies being eliminated. The average woman in the Western world right now, and unfortunately this has gone worldwide now, so the average woman on this planet will put 120 carcinogens on her skin in a day to look beautiful.
Right.
And so the chance that nature was waiting for humans to come along and innovate carcinogens to make women beautiful seems very unlikely to me. And so until we revalue beauty and start to see ourselves beautiful when we wake up on the bed, when our head is on the pillow and not a single thing has been done to our bodies yet, that's when we're in our most beautiful state. When we are falling asleep after the face has been taken off and we're back in our natural state, that is the most beautiful point we will be in that day. But we don't see that in each other, and we don't see it most of all in ourselves. I think it's actually easier to see it, that beauty in each other than it is ourselves. Right. And we know that there's a better way to do all of this. We can simply just accept these beautiful, life force bodies. These things are so miraculous.
You speak about AI all the time, and we can't change the fact that AI is here. And AI in medicine is rapidly growing. And it's here to stay. And I know you have an opinion about that, but how can AI in medicine coexist without our fundamentally disconnecting us from the intelligence of nature?
I don't think there's anything artificial about artificial intelligence. I think we need to just start looking at it as intelligence. And so there's intelligence systems. Intelligence systems become intelligent from the amount of data that they have access to.
Right.
The reason why a human brain appears intelligent is because it has more microbiome density and complexity in the gut than any other species. And those bacteria are typing onto the neurons in your gut lining to give you more data. When you take an antibiotic, your intelligence goes down, your depression goes up. You're literally decreasing the life force for your brain when you're living in this antibiotic environment. And so to reintegrate into intelligence, we have to have more connected spaces. So if we call it AI, maybe we should call it alternative intelligence or something like that for an alternative word for it. But it's not artificial. It's true intelligence. It's intelligence taking huge data sets. It's only going to produce the results that data set is capable of informing. And so if we keep feeding AI systems human behavioral data from the last couple hundred years, we will only accelerate the extinction, because the data that it's going to be looking at is showing it a value system and a philosophical reality that is separate from nature. This can be overcome by asking the right questions. The technology of AI is not dangerous. It's the questions we're asking it and the data sets we're providing it that make it dangerous. If we start asking AI, can you give me a sense of the answer from all of the indigenous wisdom texts that were produced before 200 years ago, what the pathway to happiness looks like? And that AI system goes and looks through the I Ching, looks through the whole data set of indigenous writings out of every place on earth, Greek philosophy on forward. You're going to get a completely different answer than what's my best biohacking routine today. We need to remember to ask the more important questions of each other instead of asking, how was work today? How did you feel today? At any point today, did you feel your body? And what did you feel when you felt that body? We need to start asking better questions to one another, and we'll get a more beautiful humanity for that. And then we'll design a better technologic world that integrates us into nature instead of runs from it. And so intelligence is real. Intelligence relies on the interpretation that is derived from the question and the data set it's provided. I would like to see computer systems and all of their metrics for sensing the world reintegrated into nature. We have this capacity. I want to see AI reading the information streams from all of the trees in the forests of the world. We could design that in the next 10 years. Our computer systems could be monitoring the life force within every meter of soil on the planet with very simple technology ultimately. When AI starts to understand the input of the entirety of nature, which she's capable of doing, computer systems are capable of interacting with that communication stream. And then we ask her to help humanity come in line with the metabolic life force of the planet. AI can help us make micro decisions every day. Should I buy this makeup or this makeup? Well, if you buy that one, it's going to have a negative impact on the microbiome in that region of Morocco where you're extracting those oils. So no, I wouldn't select that one. I would select this one right here. This one actually is grown locally and has this regenerative ingredient from Moringa oleifera, which grows in the desert here in the UAE. Okay, cool. I'll grab the Moringa beauty product. AI, given nature data, will make some really brilliant decisions for us very quickly.
Right.
And so alternative intelligence is maybe where we need to move to. And maybe that alternative intelligence is based on a data set of nature rather than human beliefs and human stories. And if we do that, it will become a great aid in our reconnection to nature.
I love that, alternative intelligence. When I started my brand, Be That Life, it was born out of this need to find meaning into all of the things I found no meaning for. I found that I was stuck in a hole of millions of different questions I didn't have answers for. And eventually, after so many years of trying to figure out a life that I wanted, I finally found my purpose. But it took me a really long journey to be able to come out of my comfort zone and to be able to then live a life that I was just focused on service. Because I believe humankind is about serving others, but we've become so much about our own needs and wants and less about how we can give back to humanity. So I try to be that life every single day by the way that I live, the foods that I nourish myself with, the things that I think about, and the way I treat people and the way I serve. And I want to ask you, what does be that life mean to you?
Can we do something atypical, maybe? Can I hold your hand?
Yeah.
All right. To be that life, we have to become the purpose. And so I chased service for the vast majority of my life. As a child, I served my parents, tried to make them proud of me, tried to help them be successful, tried to be the best kid and Boy Scout and churchgoer and husband and dad, doctor, scientist, chemo. I tried serving so much, and I emptied myself out to near death multiple times. And so ultimately, I'm slowly living into a be the light, be the life pattern where I realize that there is no such thing as service in nature. Everything just shows up as itself. And in showing up as itself, it serves a great, beautiful role in the abundance of nature itself. And so there's a possibility that this podcast isn't your purpose. It's your expression. Your companies are an expression of your creative force and maybe your love for life. But your purpose is to be you and more you every day. And my purpose is to be me and be more still each day so that I can see you better and see all of your beauty more accurately, so I can show you what it feels like to be seen so that I can be seen back. For too long, we've been creating altruistic stories of what our purposes are and what our jobs are, and then we measure them by external altruistic value systems that may or may not line up with nature and probably don't line up with our life path ultimately, because I've actually never, ever sat at a deathbed where somebody tells me about their service. They tell me about relationships. They tell me about the moment that they sat with this person they can't even remember the name of, but somebody sat there in the woods one day with them and they saw this amazing thing happen. I hear stories like that at the deathbed all the time. It's strange things that play through people's minds at the end of life. And it's not, they've never told me like how many nonprofits they worked for and how many people. That's not the deathbed story. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm alive right here and I'm breathing. I'm loved, and I always was loved. I'm complete, and I was always complete. I didn't know that. I was chasing this. I was trying to prove myself to the world. You are an incredible being. Your greatest value to me and to this planet is when you wake up in the morning just so grateful to be you and so full of the receipt of nature within you and feeling everything inside of your body more accurately and spend time sharing what it feels like to be you with the world around you. And then your expression will continue to be bountiful, the podcast and all the other things you're expressing. But we need to relearn how to be the purpose instead of chase purpose. And you have an incredible capacity to bring forth life through your podcasts as a mother, through your womb, all these things. I'm sorry that the world made you think that you weren't valuable enough just being you and that you needed to go serve the world in some other way. But I'm just really grateful you're here and I get to share a day with you. And I'm really grateful for the possibility that I'm enough and just me showing up and not serving anybody and not helping anybody do anything Not even helping us reconnect to nature, but just me being me, which is a really wonderful feeling to be me. I love the me that I'm discovering these days. I just love hugging people. I want to be touched all the time. I want to touch people all the time. I want to share food with everybody all the time. I want to walk in gardens. I want to taste food off the ground. I love making people kneel down on the ground and eat off the ground. It's so fun to be human. It's so playful to be us. And all the other stuff just falls in line when we set down the sense of profession or purpose, or we are the thing. We are it. We're life. We are human. We are human life. We're the most complex ecosystems that nature has ever devised on this planet. And for this, we are brilliant and we are beautiful. And you are part of that. And just really grateful to have met you today. And I wish you the best of life as you live your purpose.
You are a walking angel on earth. You stated a perspective, a change in perspective. And I think I do 100% believe that we meet people for a reason. And I'm so glad that you came today and shared so many insights that is really needed in this world today. It's just so much that you have offered that so many people don't know about. And I know because of this and because of the mission and what we're trying to do, we're going to help so many people. So thank you so much for being here.
Mabuti po.
Salamat.